The Biden document dilemma continues. This time, the National Archives, you may know them as the head librarians for the federal government, they're staying pretty quiet now that Joe Biden got caught with his hand in the classified documents drawer. And here they have been asked for a bunch of information from James Comer over at the House of Representatives. We're going to take a look at all the different moving parts here in a minute. But first, let's see what Ted Cruz is saying about all of this. He posted on Twitter, very upset. He says, look, I'm tired of this garbage, okay? Karine Jean-Pierre comes out every single day, says nothing. Then she refers us over to the White House counsel. Ian Sams is representing them, and we get nothing from him either. And Merrick Garland won't comment on it. The DOJ has no information for us. Meanwhile, we've got 4 batches of documents that have popped up out of Joe Biden's properties. They haven't searched his Rehoboth house. That we know that they were obstructing the DOJ's investigation because they were continuing to search for and find documents as late as December 20th, as late as January 12th, in fact, even though they were told to stop searching back in November. Very strange. So Ted Cruz says, all right, enough already. I want a classified briefing. I want to know exactly what's going on. Ted Cruz was on Fox News and he was explaining that there needs to be a much deeper investigation into this, including a classified briefing for all of the senators and everybody else in Congress.
Today, I made a request of our leadership on the Senate side that we have a classified briefing specifically about what classified materials Joe Biden had. All the classified materials that have been in the news. We need to know what those materials were. Listen, I've read a lot of classified documents. Every document I've read in a SCIF, a secure facility in the basement of the Capitol. But if that information concerns Burisma, if it concerns Hunter Biden, if it concerns communist China paying Hunter Biden and the Biden family millions of dollars, then it shifts into a very serious issue of corruption and real potential criminal liability.
Right. If he took those documents and stuffed them in his underpants like Sandy Berger did, we want to know what those documents were. Does he have an interest in those documents? Is there a conflict with him having possession of those? Did he take them and remove them because they were bad for his family, bad for his deals? Were they bad for Joe Biden politically? Or was it just like a request from foreign adversaries? Somebody just says, you know, we really want to know kind of what you guys know about this thing. And they go, well, we can get access to that. Guess who's a senator in Delaware? Yeah, that's right. My daddy is. My daddy's in charge of the Senate of the Delaware, and he's on the Intelligence Committee, okay? And so that's Hunter Biden, right? Meandering around with the Chinese and Burisma and so on. And then he says, yeah, I can go get that for you. Yeah, it's in my garage. You want to come over and see it? Like a high school kid. You want to see my dad's stuff? Come look at it. So they bring him over. They go through this stuff in the garage, and they're having a ton of fun.
Sure does. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Senator, for watching the Watchers here today. We appreciate that. So we continue on. Now, Ted Cruz was also responding to some of the updates that we talked about yesterday on the show, where there's a changing of the guard, right? Congress now is in control, at least in the House of Representatives, of the Republicans. And they've got an oversight committee, a committee on China. They've got now control of the House Intelligence Committee. And we saw previously that the 2 people who would ordinarily be stonewalling any of the Republican investigation are booted off the Intelligence Committee. And Kevin McCarthy dropped a big, mic drop the other day when he said and explained the reasons why, that they are liars and they are corrupt security risks through and through. So now there's a lot of reaction to this. These, 3 individuals, Omar, Schiff, and Swalwell, have been crying all over the media. We'll get to that later. But Ted Cruz is having fun with it, rightfully so. Here's what Ted Cruz says about Swalwell.
So I think it was the right step to remove Adam Schiff and then Swalwell. Today's Democrat Party for some time has been in bed with communist China. But Swalwell took that to a whole different level.
Yeah, he did.
He was literally in bed with Fang Fang, jeopardizing America's national security. And that kind of cavalier attitude, well, that has very real consequences. So I'm glad to see that leadership in the House, that the new Republican majority is standing up and fighting. I think the leadership fight that we had in the House was very beneficial for helping ensure the majority actually stands up and fight. And I can tell you, today I made a request of our leadership on the Senate side that we have a classified briefing specific.
All right, I think we heard that part of the clip.
And real potential criminal liability.
That's right, criminal liability for Swalwell making bang bang with Fang Fang and, then getting on the Intelligence Committee. You have to wonder, what do the Chinese have on him? Do they have that whole relationship basically recorded? Yeah, if she's a Chinese spy, like, is everything live streamed over there to Beijing? Oh, gross. Oh, those poor Chinese people. All right. So here you can see we've got Matt Gaetz. He's also chiming in on all of this. A lot of questions about why this is all coming to fruition now, right? We had a big debate about this because they found all of these documents on November 2nd. And on November 2nd, we had just, what was it? I don't know, like 6 days away from November 8th, which happened to be the midterm elections. Kind of an important moment in America when the Republicans were looking to have this big red wave that was somehow blunted for some reason. Maybe it was because some of the stories were a little bit, covered up by the White House. In this case, that seems to be reality. November 2nd, the documents are found. We don't learn about this until January of 2023, the next year, because the White House was covering this whole thing up. But the question is, why did they pop up all of a sudden, right? Why did these documents just appear? One theory that we've talked about was that the Republicans are now in charge of the House of Representatives. They've got the House Intelligence Committee. They've got the Oversight Committee. They are going to be breathing down Joe Biden's neck worse than Joe Biden breathes down everybody else's neck. And they're going to be demanding documents and demanding answers. And they've got to sort of get rid of the evidence. So they brought the commercial shredders in and just started taking the wheelbarrows out of the Biden residence. And that's a big problem for the rest of us who want to know what those documents were. So Matt Gaetz is on with Laura Ingraham, and he's explaining it's weird how these documents were just, magically appearing. It almost is like the Democrats want to evacuate Joe Biden from the nomination for the next election and install somebody else who we talked a lot about here, called Gavin Newsom.
That any decision from Biden is not going to come until after he delivers the State of the Union. So what do you ultimately expect that decision to be now?
Well, things in Washington aren't always what they seem. Consider this. It was Joe Biden's Democrat personal lawyer that was rummaging around his stuff looking for evidence of a crime that his septuagenarian client committed 9 years ago. And then he alerts the Democrat staff at the White House that does the absolute worst thing you could possibly do. They sat on the information. They should have diffused the Trump matter and then inoculated themselves in the process.
He's being generous. They covered it up.
Then the moment this is leaked to CBS, you have the Democrat Biden Department of Justice appoint a special counsel. And now the big tell is that even Joe Biden's strongest allies in the Congress, like Senator Cruz, are saying that they approve of the appointment of a special counsel to criminally investigate the president. Maybe the deep state and a lot of these Democrats have figured out that they'd rather roll with Gavin Newsom than Joe Biden. The Republicans might not even have to help the Democrats take out their trash.
Wow. So Matt Gaetz, I think he might be onto something, right? Joe Biden was always the guy to just kind of drag the Democratic Party past the finish line. And they had a whole bunch of, different activities going on back during that election where it sort of excused Joe Biden from being present, right? It was very much an election where people were voting against Trump rather than for Biden. So nobody's really excited about him in 2024, right? Are they excited for Kamala either? So one of two things might happen, right? Joe Biden might resign. Kamala takes the place. Kamala runs unopposed for president next time. Doubt it. Kamala runs because Biden resigns. She takes the presidency. She has an open primary. She faces a Newsom. She loses to Newsom because obviously he's more competent than she is and he can speak. And then she gets beaten and then Newsom is the next president. Or Joe Biden decides, to hell with all this, I'm going to run again.
Well, Congressman, before President Biden answered the question on the classified docs today, he snapped. Watch.
The only
that was a while ago.
First of all, Gavin Newsom is ominously standing right behind him, which is one of our his brief of it after he gives a few remarks.
The Department of Justice is now criminally investigating him. His own staff put him in a terrible position by sitting on this information, and his own lawyer was searching around for the evidence of a paperwork crime from almost a decade ago.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. It's all popping out now. Now we've got more clips here because Marjorie Taylor-Green was out in Congress. Congress is back in session, and Marjorie was talking kind of about a different issue. We're talking about the refilling of gas and the refilling of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and so on. But Marjorie was out and she was explaining about in the last Congress, she had filed articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. And a lot of people are talking about that again, right? And they're finding multiple different reasons that might justify impeachment. One is the border. One is the Hunter stuff. We also saw, well, she's going to explain it here. I'll leave it to her.
Mr. Chair, before I discuss the details of my amendment, I want to applaud the new Republican majority for giving members the opportunity to offer amendments in a more open process. The People's House has been broken for far too long, and I look forward to working with my colleagues in an open process for the remainder of this Congress. I also want to thank Chairman McMorris Rodgers for her leadership on this issue to put American energy first. I co-sponsored this legislation because I believe it puts America back on track to regain energy independence. This is such an important issue and critical piece of legislation that I believe we cannot stop short. We need to chart a path back to energy independence and ensure President Biden is not able to sell our critical oil supplies to China or any other rogue nations. President Biden used emergency authorities to sell hundreds of millions of barrels of oil to our enemies. My amendment would prevent President Biden from claiming an emergency to further reduce our strategic oil supplies. This is why I filed impeachment articles last Congress against President Biden on the grounds that he endangered, compromise, and undermine the energy security of the United States by selling oil from the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve to foreign nations. President Biden has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to the national security of our country. No president in the history of the United States has ordered a liquidation of the SPR on this scale. He sold 40% of our critical oil supply to trick and deceive the American people before the election. Rather than unleashing American energy here at home, he has robbed our country. While President Biden took office in 2021, the SPR contained 638 million barrels of oil. Since then, he has slashed our oil inventory to 371 million barrels.
Yikes.
He has decimated the SPR to the lowest level since December 1983, before some members of this body were even born. He shredded the offers from oil companies to resupply the reserve. He gave away 7 million barrels of oil to a communist Chinese state-run energy firm.
Interesting there. Very curious. Now, we're going to follow this thread, right? There's all sorts of energy threads in the Hunter Biden files. We talked about this here when we had an excellent interview with Garrett Ziegler, by the way, from MarcoPoloUSA.org, if you haven't listened to that one. We had multiple conversations with others who said that what the Biden family was doing is essentially engaging in these energy sort of deals. They were working with the Chinese. They engaged with the Chinese, and they set up another shell company essentially to buy rights to mines in Congo. And then once the deal was done, then they would sell as their shell company their rights to China, right? The idea was you didn't want any one particular mine or any one of these energy deals to have more than like 80% ownership of the Chinese. So what Hunter's company would do is come in and be a 40% owner. Then the Chinese would be 40% owners, and then the Congo would be 20% owners. And then boom, after 2 years go by, Hunter's and his company, their shell, they just sell it over to the Chinese. So the Chinese ultimately get the 80% that the law was supposed to preclude them from getting, right? And around we go, anywhere we go. Hunter Biden went with Joe Biden to China and was hanging out with him when he was vice president. He was hanging out with a bunch of the Chinese sort of, the other compatriots, I guess, on the other side of the equation, the people they were doing deal with the Chinese. And so we're going to follow that thread as it continues. But you can see this, right? We're going to see a lot more of this behavior. Marjorie Taylor-Green is on, I forget which committee, maybe the China committee. I think maybe the COVID committee. I think she's actually on the COVID committee. But they've got control of the House of Representatives now. So if they want to actually move forward with these articles of impeachment this time, they can. And we'll see what they do, whether they decide to do that or not. Now, Joe Biden, meanwhile, our very competent president, was out there today, and he gave a speech where he was explaining his progress on our country's economy. And here is how he explained his progress on the national debt.
No president added more to the debt in 4 years than my president.
Oh.
I misspoke. 25% of our country's entire debt.
What?
No president added more to the debt in 4 years than my president. I misspoke. 25% of our country's entire debt.
Long pause for effect. That's not me. Long pause. Joe Biden, listen. America, he's going to explain you some economic knowledge.
No president added more to the debt in 4 years than my president. I misspoke. 25% of our country's entire debt.
Okay. Well, so nobody's added more to our debt than Joe Biden. Amazing. That's our president having a difficult time out there. Now, of course, the Republicans are going to continue on. They're demanding a lot more from the Biden administration. In particular, they want answers to some questions. James Comer was on speaking about this on Newsmax, and he was telling us that they're looking for more transparency out of the Biden administration.
I have a lot of questions. It's hard for me to believe that when Joe Biden moved out of his vice president's office, that the documents were delivered to multiple locations. One would believe the documents were all delivered to one location. It was probably the Biden Center. And then somehow some more documents ended up at Joe Biden's house. That's what you would assume. But what we know is that those documents were at his house at the same time that Hunter Biden was living there. And Hunter Biden is a national security risk. Here's a guy that's been kicked out of the most exclusive hotel in California. He's banned from staying there. He was asked to leave and not renew his lease at his office building in Georgetown. So, both times it was because of people he was bringing in. So the hotel and the office building didn't like the people he was associating himself with, if that tells you anything. And then the other concern with the overall investigation, we're investigating the Biden family for influence peddling. They've received millions of dollars from our adversaries, especially in China. Our adversaries aren't giving the Bidens millions of dollars for charity. They're doing it because they want a return on their investment.
Obviously.
My concern is somebody was going through those documents and they may have been passing information on, classified information on to our adversaries. So this is very concerning, and we're not going to let up on this investigation.
Interesting stuff. So saying that the family is literally peddling influence. Of course, we've covered that a long time here because they have been doing that for years now, right? I mean, basically what we talked about was Hunter Biden being the bagman for the Joe Biden presidency for a long time. We're going to talk about NARA now, the National Archives, because they just kind of got quiet. When it was Donald Trump who was the person responsible for being raided by the FBI, they were screaming from the rooftops. In fact, they put out press releases and so on, but they're very quiet now. We're going to find out why right after we talk about our friends over at Goldco, because as you know, my friends, if you have an IRA or a 401k or a savings account, things are scary out there. The Biden administration has printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. And we just heard Joe say it. Most debt of any president ever. And so the national debt, as you can see, is over $31 trillion, and it's not stopping. Inflation's the highest we've seen since the 1980s. It's only a matter of time until the house of cards comes crashing down. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends at Goldco. See how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. Very easy. Go to robertlikesgold.com, and I do like gold, and they will give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open up a qualifying account. That's at robertlikesgold.com. And they're A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau, and it makes you feel just nice and thick up there. It makes you feel fabulous. We love the gold at robertlikesgold.com. Now, let's go back over to NARA, the National Archives, the head librarian for the entire country. Published January 25th, Fox News tells us the following. They write, in the scandals headline, perfectly appropriate, they tell us that the National Archives is silent as disparity between the handling of the Biden and the Trump documents fuels ongoing questions. A House Oversight Committee spokesperson tells Fox News that NARA, the librarians, missed its deadline to hand over the requested documents. Oh, isn't that convenient? So James Comer sent over a letter, we read it here on this channel, demanding answers from Deborah Steidel-Wall, who is the head librarian, the head of NARA. And apparently they're not cooperating. This article says the following. The National Archives, NARA, has remained mum in the weeks since Biden's document scandal broke. A vastly different approach it took regarding former President Trump and his storage. This says that NARA dubs itself the nation's record keeper. We call them the librarians here because they collect all the documents. But here it appears that the National Archives has fallen quite short of its mission following the revelation that Biden had documents located in Wilmington at the Penn Biden Center. The records, which reportedly include at least 25 to 30 documents marked classified, were found in 5 separate disclosures since November 2nd. The week prior to the November midterms and were in Biden's possession anywhere a minimum of 6 years when he left the presidency and at least 14 years when he first left the Senate. Yet the National Archives, this is weird, right? And we talked about this. Why were the National Archives following Trump around? They knew everything. They had agents monitoring him, taking pictures of the boxes being moved in and out, right? They were like little librarian hall monitor Nazis. And the problem is they didn't do that same thing with Joe and Joe's records. In fact, they didn't even know they were gone. They were just floating around there in the wild at multiple residents in multiple locations for a long period of time. The National Archives, they formally requested Trump's records in May, less than 4 months after he left office. And that spurred a years-long battle, a dispute between them that ultimately led to the FBI raiding his home. Now, Trump and his defenders have said that unlike Biden, he had the authority to declassify those documents. NARA declined to comment when asked about why they beat up on Trump so badly, but why they're just playing with kids' gloves when it comes to Biden. NARA was quite outspoken during the Trump saga. Beginning in early 2022, if you remember, the National Archives put out a series of press releases. They were commenting all over the place. Here's what the head librarian said there. They said some of Trump's presidential records received by the National Archives had been torn up by the former President Trump. They said he tore them up, as had been reported in the press, that we recovered and we taped together some of these torn up records. And they were turned over, a number of torn up records. Right? The point is they're talking about it. They're very upset about it. They sent out another press release, February 7th. NARA had arranged to transport boxes as required. The next day, they filed another press release. Here's another one. The National Archives, when people were making fun of Obama and his records, people were saying that he had them in an old, Chinese restaurant or something. They put out a press release. They're like, oh, we're doing a great job. Let us tell you, they're not actually in a Chinese restaurant. They're somewhere else. We moved 30 million pages of unclassified records over to different locations. And then they debunked other claims, right? They put out another press release. This is false. We've never done anything like this when it came to Obama. Then in 2022, they had a full-throated defense of Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Reagan, right? They defended everybody, but not Trump, because they're political hacks there, just like everywhere else in the federal government. So this raises questions about whether other office holders have classified documents stuffed in their pants. Massive double standards for both sides. Concerns over the politicization of the National Archives have made their way to Capitol Hill. We read the letter that Comer sent over to the National Archives. And this, of course, is going to continue on. So that is why NARA is so quiet, is because they're political hacks. No real answers from them, but we'll see if they do respond. They missed their deadline. We'll follow them. Marsha Blackburn is another senator who weighed in on this and says that Hunter Biden might be worthy of a deep dive investigation.
What we're seeing here is a pattern that I'm sure is very unsettling to Biden Incorporated.
Yeah.
Because for years, what they have done is to trade on Joe Biden's name. That's what Hunter Biden appears to have been good at doing, is saying, I'm a Biden, hire me. And that is what you see in this pattern.
Here you see an email that says Hunter Biden's detailed email on Ukraine. And the U.S. will respond with even stronger sanctions. Buy a burner phone from a 7-Eleven or a CVS tomorrow, and I'll do the same. Nice. Hunter Biden's email. We'll read it in a minute.
They talk about building a long-term relationship. They talk about how they can be valuable to Ukraine, to Burisma, to being able to expand their growth. And you know, one of the things that I noticed in it was they even say go to a 7-Eleven or a CVS and buy a cell phone.
Yeah, burner phone.
They were looking to get a burner phone in their hands that they would use to communicate, so there would not be that tracking.
And Senator, the other.
And that's the big
Washington
question.
Post, New York Times has authenticated the Hunter Biden laptop. Now, Hunter Biden allegedly used
Oh,
classified
great.
materials.
We got to do a
to
refresh
profit
because it's still playing the video on our mind map. Sometimes I exit it out too fast and it still plays in the background, but we have a solution. All right. And so that was Marsha Blackburn, senator, who is saying it might be worth digging into what Hunter Biden was doing. We have the letter next. We're going to dive into the actual email that Hunter Biden sent. But of course, we'll continue to cover all of the follow-up to the Biden confidential classified documents scandal. And I hope you join us as we do.